Hey, welcome to this episode of Footnotes. Today we're talking to someone that actually I've wanted to talk to for quite some time, and it's Chad Rochester, founder of the Pierson Collective. And you may have heard of the Pierson Collective because they're the group that make Footnotes sound good and look good. They've been with us from the beginning, and I've always thought that his story of leaving a profession and starting a business was one that needed to be told. I can't wait for you to hear it next on Footnotes. Well, we're here today, Chad Rochester, founder at the Pierson Collective. And Chad, I got to tell you, and you're going to laugh or you're going to react somehow, but I've been waiting for this one because, you guys have been, you guys are the ones that make Footnotes sound good and look good since episode 2. And I think we're shooting number 48. And I guess let's just start kind of at the beginning. You weren't always Pierson Collective. You weren't always doing that. So what were you doing before then? Take us, what stage of life were you in? Like, what was going on?
Well, in high school, I'm just kidding. Go way back.
Yeah. First I was born.
Yeah. And then I was before Pierson Collective, I was teaching high school.
What did you teach?
I taught English.
Okay.
So high school English. Prior to that, I was playing music, and then I went to school for teaching high school English, very specific degree. Mm-hmm. And that was great for the first 4 or 5 years, 6 years. And then it wasn't great. Not because of the students, not because of the parents, not because of my school. I always feel like I need to say that. It was more structural issues, right? Okay. Essentially, a focus on standardized testing was kind of forcing me to do things that I philosophically disagreed with. Like I felt like I couldn't do what I needed to do for my students. And I feel like you can only push back against that for so long. So I kind of ended up in a tough spot where I was like, I think I'm going to leave. I don't know what that's going to look like. I had a moment of just being like, I have to quit teaching. And my wife was like, okay, which really threw me for a loop. So,
wait, it threw you for a loop that she was understood, okay. That she understood that? Yeah.
Okay. No hesitation. I was like, oh. So when I ended up switching schools, I was an international baccalaureate coordinator for the past few years, which was a lot of logistical stuff, kind of a lead teacher role. So I left that school and went to a different school just to see if any frustrations, if they were bigger than one school, which they were. And so midway through that year, I was like, I have to leave. But then it's like, well, what do I do? I don't want to stay in education, so I'm going to leave. I applied to everything you can imagine, like project management positions, like communications positions. Just this is, pre-COVID. So the great resignation hadn't happened yet. So I guess it was tough to get a job, especially with really like a master's of teaching secondary education. It's very specific. Yeah. Midway through that year, I was like, well, I'm not getting any calls. I really enjoy doing some videography, which I've been doing for some friends in different capacities. And so it hit me like, wait a minute, businesses need quality video and photography. And there's a huge gap between a high, full level video production firm and your niece with a camera that's in college or whatever. There's this big gap. Sure. And so I just thought hey, I can freelance and potentially make a teacher salary, which is kind of a low bar. And so from the get-go, I was just like, I'll try freelancing. I don't want to call it Chad Rochester Media or anything like that. Because if it works out, it'd be great to have other people involved. Hence the name, the Pierson Collective. My middle name's Pierson. So that's kind of where it came from, even though it kind of sounds like a textbook company. Now that I think about it. But anyway, it was one of those decisions you make in 24 hours and you didn't think it was going to last 4 years, 5 years, Yeah. And so that's kind of what led up to the Pierson Collective.
How long did you, so it sounds like you still had your day job and were doing that. How long between your day job and this kind of thing on the side and then it becoming sort of your full time?
Well, it kind of was in a unique situation in that I finished my contract. So I finished teaching that school year through May, but you get paid through the end of the summer. And then I announced, just kind of hey, this is what I'm trying to do. And within the first month or so, this was like April of the last year of my teaching, I had to take time off to do this work. So it was kind of it boded well that maybe this can work out. And then I was like, I'm going to give it the summer and see if that continues. And then I was also in a unique position where I could just put everything back into the business and kind of grow it that way. And then the following fall, so I guess it's just kind of a tricky answer because I was kind of like, I'm just going to give it a go. There's no like number on a whiteboard or anything that I was shooting for, because I knew my wife was still working, and we, it saved, and we're like, let's give this a try. If things go terribly wrong, I could still probably get a teaching job in the middle of the following year. That was kind of the bad.
Yeah, I mean, you had a fallback. What was it like? Because I think, Chad, a lot of people watch this and they are maybe where you were. In other words, they've got an idea, they've got something that they're doing, and maybe even getting paid for it, but they still got the day job. What was it like when you realized that you had sort of the freedom to leave the day job and pursue Pierson?
I was excited about it, but I also was kind of like, I think until maybe this year, I'm always just like, this is just probably not going to work out. Like we'll just keep doing the best we can, but it might not work out. And it's like maybe a strange view of, how to approach a business. I think that's the thing is like, I didn't really set out to run a business. I just enjoy creating things. And so when I set out, that was the fulfilling thing. Like, I'm getting to work with these really cool companies, like, guitar pedal companies. My friend was traveling and got to go on tour with him, like really cool things. And then I was even enjoying creating, for like a mortgage company or something. It was kind of like a challenge. And so I found that enjoyable. So I felt some freedom in it, but it wasn't like this rush of like, oh, I'm going to give this thing a go.
So when you started it full time, I mean, how did you get jobs?
I still haven't figured out how we get clients. I think, I've lived here a long time and know a lot of people. So early on, friends would give me an opportunity, and then that would go well. And then it was word of mouth. And so I think that's just kind of how we kept things going for the past, 3 or 4 years. Like, you gave us a chance really early on. That was like within our first year. And we had kind of like some relationships with people where we got to do like a mortgage company and then like a law firm and then like a school district or something, where right out of the gate, it kind of like validated that we could do work across different industries. And then somewhere around like the fall of the first year of trying this, maybe it was earlier than that, but really quickly, everyone was like, oh, you can do video? Will you do this video? We do this video. And then I found this kind of like pull of like just being like a videographer, right? Which like a wedding and that's great, or like an event thing. Mm-hmm. But Eric, who came on the first project, he was there. He still had his job, but he was the photographer, and he's kind of like we together are the Pierson Collective. And so he early on pulled me aside and was like, hey, what do you want this thing to be? Like, you have this idea of growing like a creative firm that can have a lot of different people at the same table, creating really cool things for all sorts of companies. Mm-hmm. And that's very different than like taking every video job that comes. Mm-hmm. And so having someone like that kind of helped me like refocus where I wanted to go. Mm-hmm. And then make some strategic decisions after that was super important. And then with that in mind, everything, like kind of the way we approach is like, if we're doing the project, whatever it is, photo, video, anything like that, then it has to be the best thing we've ever done. And that changes. Like 3 years ago, what was the best thing we in our minds had ever done, we would look at now and be like, we want to change this. But I think that kind of like, hey, we want to get better at our craft. And that's what is fulfilling to us. So if we're doing your video, it has to be the coolest thing we've ever done. I think over 3 or 4 years, that kind of just like snowballs to where people are interested in working with us because of what we have done. And we tried to pivot to being a creative firm and not just video producers. Obviously, we do a ton of video.
So as a creative firm, I mean, for those of us that are not sort of in that business, we might hire those. But what is that? I mean, what as a founder, I mean, what do you want that to be?
I think for us, we made that decision because we wanted to be able to bring creative ideas to the table with a client. Whereas if you're just like the technical person that's hitting record, that's needed. And we do that, but we also help like with the whole creative concept that might be, like for someone like Bricker and Beam, it's super stylized, and we got to do a lot of really cool stuff with music because we all have a music background. And then, equally as fulfilling to us is like Richland School District 2 or something like that. And they want like a creative treatment for like all of their career tech programs, so we come in and we help with that and what's it going to look like and what's it going to sound like. So it's like a very nuanced difference. Mm-hmm. I think we sometimes say like, we're your creative department, and at a certain level, a business has to have that, right? You have your marketing department, you have a creative department, they work together. And so we kind of try to stay in that space because that's what we find the most fulfilling.
What's it like to choose the work that you do, as opposed to, like you said, there are people that have cameras and they can go shoot events, and there are a lot of people that do that, or they'll say yes to that in addition to maybe other projects that they would prefer to do. But it sounds like Pierson is at a point where you get to sort of have some choice as the firm, and not just, hey, this client will pay us. What's that like?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely still have to, be strategic with it,
Sure.
As far as like, expenses and running a business. I feel like in the last year and a half, really, especially the last year, the people that are approaching us, like, are approaching us for that particular reason, like something unique or different, or, we really like the way these photos looked and we want something similar. So, it's just as pivoted recently where people are approaching us. So almost like everyone that we talk to, for the most part, has seen something or liked something that we've done, and they're interested in pursuing that, as opposed to someone like Googling videographer, and hey, do you do weddings? We still get those. Weddings are terrifying to me because there's so much pressure, but like it's all valuable and necessary. It's just kind of like pivoting and trying to find what we are most fulfilled in doing.
So I think it's like you kind of hit that vein that I think people dream about, is where you're doing fulfilling work for people that want that kind of work. In other words, you can want it all you want, but if you don't find anybody that will hire you, then you have to do other things.
And we did a lot of other things for a long time, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah, for sure.
But I also think it's interesting that I think you said earlier, we want the current thing we're doing to be the coolest thing we've ever done. I mean, so if you guys are setting your bar internally, I mean, is there a stopping point to that? I mean, is there a ceiling on that? I mean, what challenges could that present maybe in the future?
I mean, I don't think there is a ceiling to it, which is, I think, the thing that's exciting about it. Because I mean, in many, like a million ways where we are now, I never thought we would be here. Like some of the projects we've done in the past few months are things I never would have dreamed of us doing. It's like what's normalized, like changes over and over again. And so for us, like, that's why it's really like a collective. It's like Eric and I and Micah just basically pushing each other. Because if there's ever a moment where I'm like, I feel like this is pretty good, then I'll show it, and then they're going to be like, no, we could be better, or no, that is good, but, So I think that's just kind of our approach to the whole thing. It's probably a terrible business approach, but for us, it's kind of like, I mean, we did do this to pay some bills, be able to do things that we enjoy, but like, we, enjoy the craft and want to do it better than we've done it before in different ways. And and we can grow. I mean, we can grow so much more, and that's just kind of, I think without saying it, that's kind of just our like ethos. That's how we operate in the office. Is just, this has to be the best thing we've done.
You mentioned earlier about the three of you have a background in music, but also like performing music. I mean, are there lessons or even just experiences that you guys draw from performing musically that translate into sort of the business or the collective?
I think so, but like maybe not the way that one might think.
Okay.
So Eric and I especially, I met Eric 3 years ago, like a really long time ago, to play in a band, and we toured and we played, and then he was in a band, and then I was in a band that got signed, and almost, like all of these different things. There's a lot of people that can say that story. But all that to say, when I started this, having the experience of like, I'm trying to make it as a musician or a band is a really big long shot that didn't work out. So I think when I began Pierson Collective and as a team, I feel like our goals and like what we're fulfilled by are a little more realistic. So what I mean is, we met some really creative, amazing people over the summer. We were doing some stuff with USC. They were making a feature film, and we were kind of documenting that process. All of those students, it was like 70% student crew, unbelievably talented, right? And they're 22, they're 24, they're 19. They could be the next great filmmaker, right? They could be the next great screenwriter. Whereas we are like, it's never gonna happen, for us, not for them, right? But for us. So when we get to do a really cool documentary project for a nonprofit here in Columbia, that's really exciting to us. Whereas some of those people might not find the same fulfillment, right? Because they still could potentially do X, Y, Z. So I think it's almost like giving us like a more realistic outlook for what we might do. And I feel like we've surpassed that already, in a very I don't think we haven't done these projects like, oh, this is so amazing. But what modest goals we had, we've passed them. And so I think that lesson of like, the other thing we realized playing music is it's a lot of work, and like 20% of it's playing music. The other part of it is just traveling, logistics, management kind of stuff. And that's helped us approach like the work of this business, where it's just like, a lot of it's not the most exciting thing. It's not always like camera in hand running around shooting great shots and meeting cool people. There's a lot of like in the office just editing or logistics. And so it's helped us approach it all kind of in a healthier way, I guess, if that makes sense. So
Yeah, I think it's interesting, this thread of being realistic, because I think some people, if they were just maybe reading like a transcript of this, or maybe not hearing how you explain it, think that that's just a form of a limitation. But it sounds like that being realistic has actually created a little bit of freedom, and that the boundaries are they're just not that, it's not that confining.
For sure. We can get excited about creating content for anyone for the most part, and then like where that content's going to live and what that's going to do, we kind of have. And so, yeah, it's almost like we have no limitations because we have no like massive aspirations. It sounds kind of depressing when you say it that way, I guess. I don't know.
I mean, I don't think it's depressing. I mean, I think it is a perspective that's probably necessary. I mean, because, you consume media, I consume media, and I think there's a lot of messages out there about don't be limited. Like, you can do anything, you can do everything. But I think when you've had enough birthdays, you realize that that's not necessarily the truth. It does sound good. It provokes an emotional response, but then you've got to bring it back down to 11 o'clock on a Thursday. How are you really going to put that into action? And so when I'm hearing you talk about being realistic, especially based on previous experience and your stage in life, I mean, I guess I'm biased, but I do think that that's something that people need to know is okay. Kind of let themselves off the hook. But it's not necessarily where they're settling or doing less than their potential. I think it's something quite different.
Yeah, it's like trying to find fulfillment where you're at. And then, but always like, I definitely feel like things could happen and we could do more, So it's not like that. It's just that, at this point, like I want to do good work and have really happy clients and then like go home and hang out with my family, And so there's like the balance of all of that. So yeah, I mean, we definitely enjoy being challenged at a production level. Like we've had some projects this month that were, we're like, oh, wow, I think we can do this, and then, we could, it worked out and it was fine. So we like to be challenged and we feel confident in our abilities, but we're also fulfilled in like most of the projects that we're doing currently.
What do you see out there, for Pierson, not necessarily maybe from a business standpoint, if you will, although I think we want to get to that, but what's on the project bucket list? Hypothetically, what are the kinds of things that now that you've done what you've done, you've chosen to be challenged, what would you like to be doing? What are the things out there that...
Yeah, I think project wise, we really enjoy doing documentary work.
Okay.
I think in some ways it's kind of become something we're known for, kind of like if you look at the projects we've done recently, that's kind of been in that. But I think we like to they're usually like really running gun, kind of quick, a few months here or there. I think we'd like to do like a longer one, where we get to kind of like unpack that story a little more and then visualize that. That would be really, really cool. We did something really close to some narrative filmmaking 2 weeks ago, which was like kind of new for us, and it went well. So like we're kind of interested in that. I don't have any like, oh, this project would be, it'd be great to do some documentary work for like a big cycling company or a skate company or something like that. But I'm sure all the other guys would have, different opinions on that. But yeah, we're kind of, the projects are growing, the scopes are growing. So it's really interesting to be in that now. So I have a friend who does what we do like up in North Carolina, and he is the king of like pitching. Like he'll just be like, I want to work with all these companies, and he'll like do all these crazy pitches. And sometimes it works out, and I'm like, should we be doing that or something? Yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of all been, internal, who we know, and word of mouth spreading.
Yeah, it sounds like you're letting your work sort of be the calling card. You're putting the work out there, people see it, and then I guess the phone rings or the text comes in and says, hey, can you do that for me? Is that how it's working right now?
Yeah, essentially. Yeah. I think the other thing that we'd like to do more of that we haven't been able to do a ton of is like audio branding. Obviously, all of us have a music background. We got to do some of that for Brooker and Beam a few years ago. It's something that I think you have to be a certain size company to understand it, like, McDonald's or something where we all know that we can all sing that, right? That would be really we just would be really interested in doing that kind of work. We already make most of the music for our clients internally just because it's easier that way. We can kind of create what we want. So I think something like having those kinds of projects would be really, really cool. That just hasn't, for whatever reason, gotten traction with clients that we're currently working with.
So I want to kind of go back to something you said earlier on when you were talking about when you were still teaching, but thinking that this was what you wanted to do and trying to determine like, do I jump, do I not? But you said you talked to your wife about it, and almost there was an immediate positive and encouraging response. I think anyone who's done anything difficult and is in a marital relationship knows, like, when you have that kind of support, it's essential. But talk about what was that like what was it like to get that reaction from that person for that thing?
I was really unhappy teaching. And so I think she, as a partner, was just like wanted to see me do something that brought me joy, and then obviously that trickles down to the whole family, like, and so, but when it was like, no, I think I'm really going to do this, she just kept being like, yeah, I think you should try. Totally. We haven't, I guess I should ask her, but there was no like one moment of like, hey, I'm going to do this, and her being like, okay. It was just this subtle kind of, I think I'm going to try this and see what happens. And like I said, it was always like, but if it doesn't work out, it's fine, and we kept, we kept kind of approaching it in that way. And then it's just kind of like snowballed to where we are now. But we were just talking about the other night, and she was just said like, for her, it's because she has a job that she loves very much. And so now we can both have that. And it's just a really, great environment for us and for our kids to, we all have bad days, but on the whole, like, we really enjoy our work. And so that's a great kind of baseline to have, the work-life balance.
So you mentioned that, she has a work that she's doing that she finds fulfilling, and then now you've got the same, and that's cool that you both have it. Have you thought about how that could affect your children? I mean, certainly, the financial provision and all that stuff, but I mean, outside of those direct things, do you sense that there's an indirect benefit that your children get from that?
I mean, I think so. I mean, we both get home earlier than normal, like than we used to. And I think, my daughter is almost 9, and she's like, I'm going to start a business and I'm going to take photos, which is like inevitable, I think. And she's good at it. She's interested in it. So I think, there's like this subconscious, we can be around more, we can be present more, and we're not bringing work home. I mean, we do, but not in the same way that I might have in my past life. And that definitely, we had a busy 2 weeks of our work, and my son, who's 7, was like, Dad, like, what's going on? It was so abnormal. And so I think that it's normalized for them in a way that they might not understand until they're older. But I definitely think that they have the benefit of like 2 parents who are pretty laid back when they get home, and, and they are interested in our work because we like to talk about it, and when I get home, they always want to see like, what did you work on today, and I'll show them. So there is that element to it for sure.
Yeah, I've kind of wondered, when children are around parents that enjoy what they're doing. And again, I haven't heard you mention billions of dollars or fame and fortune, but you do enough where the provision is there to take care of the family. But to me, there's got to be some rub-off effect on just attitudes toward work. If you have parents that just always, or that complain a lot about work conditions or things like that, some of that might be beyond their control, but I got to think that rubs off on children in terms of how they look at work. If mom and dad were always talking about blank, 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 or, they were mad when they came home, or they were, and again, it has nothing to do with the child, but it's how that parent spent the last 9 or 10 hours, I think kind of rubs off. And
I think also too, like, our daughter, especially seeing I was a teacher and then I left and now I'm doing this. I think that's an important shift to see for a child going into whatever the future is going to be, right? Like, what's college going to be in 10 years? Like, what is, like, our job in this way didn't really exist 7-8 years ago, So I think having that like shift where it's not like my dad who worked his whole life at like a one business, like that just doesn't exist in the same way, and that's okay. And you can pivot to something that's even better, potentially. So that's an important thing for them to see, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. My generation, our generation, my parents both worked at one place. My dad actually switched jobs, but within the same profession. But there was not really much change.
Yeah.
And my mother was a school teacher for
my mom taught school
36 years. So,
my dad was in textiles. So around 2000, that all shifted. So he had to pivot, but he was there for 20 years, So, yeah.
So I know you said earlier, like there's not really a whiteboard with a goal written on it. And you taught some about the types of projects that you'd like to do, but I mean, just as we kind of try to land this, I mean, what do you think is next, or what do you think is upcoming for Pierson Collective?
I mean, we are trying to grow the team. So we have we have a handful of people that we bring on whenever we can, like contract them in. Like as a collective, I like the idea of like everyone kind of being W-2, not having to worry about that end of year surprise, kind of like, and so we have a few other people or one other person that's going to come on in some capacity. And then we're looking at, all the things that you're supposed to do as a business. Like we're looking at our processes and how we can make those better, and talking to a few people as far as that goes. Those are kind of the things that are on the radar. We've done some branding work in the past, and we kind of have gotten so busy doing the creative photo video work that we haven't had time to kind of grow that in the way we want to. And so the goal is with those people in place that we can kind of give some attention to that side. As far as like brand messaging, logo design, things that we've done for probably like, 10 clients over the past few years, just kind of not under the radar, just kind of getting into knowing a client and they have a need and we can kind of help them with that. But we wanted to make sure that we could do the thing that we love to do as like excellently as possible before we start. We didn't want to just like try to do everything all at once, which is actually how I set out, like in my ignorance 4 years ago. And then I was like, whoa, wait a minute, there's a lot going on here. So I've kind of niche down. Isn't that what they say? Riches in the niches? Yeah. So that's kind of the big picture for us over the next few months.
Okay. Chad, when someone's listening to this and they want to either hire you or come work for you or whatever, like where can people find you?
And so our website is thepierson.com because the Pierson Collective was already taken. So that's what our website is. And then I think we're just the Pierson Collective on Instagram and Facebook. Is that right? I think it's just the Pierson Collective. I should give you a card now or something. But yeah, there aren't many other Pierson Collectives that I'm aware of. Yeah. So that's us.
Well, thank you for sitting down. Thank you for doing this. I know I had to kind of twist your arm a little bit to do that, but I've been waiting for this episode. I mean, you guys have helped us in the Footnotes effort. I mean, there would be no Footnotes without Pierson. I mean, really, it would just be us sitting on Teams, making a crappy recording, and putting that out there. And that's not what we wanted to do. I mean, we wanted to create something that people would actually watch. And even though we podcasted, I mean, they're listening, but the audio quality and all that stuff, I mean, that's what we wanted. And we would not be doing it without you guys.
Well, thank you. Thanks for trusting us with it. And thanks for the guys. It's a team effort, very much so.
Cool. Thank you.